Everyone knows all about Barcelona's financial difficulties, and yet they still continue to buy players. How is this possible? Let's find out. So the first thing to say is that Barcelona are in a lot of debt. So if you look at the board in front of me here, just got a timeline of that debt. And you can see here in 2021, it reaches a figure of 1.3 billion, and next year it's estimated to be a figure even higher than that. Now it's worth saying at this point that not all debt is bad debt. If you can manage your debt, that's great. And as we look at the beginning of this timeline, we can see that Barcelona are largely managing their debt. They're hitting figures of around 680 million euros, and they're able to keep that debt within a stable sort of range. Obviously, 2020 and 2021, things start going out of hand. And the reason why the debt gets out of control at this point is because of COVID. So on the board in front of me here, we've got the Barcelona revenue per season. We can trace that through time. And as you can see, as we approach 2020, you can see that revenue, the money that Barcelona are bringing in, is just increasing year on year. Get to 18-19. And Barcelona are on the cusp of €1 billion of revenue. And Josep Bartomeu, who was the president at the time, said that he expected Barcelona to be a club who would be putting up over €1 billion of revenue every season. 1920 comes along, COVID comes along, and as you can see, that revenue drops off. Now, obviously, in these sorts of situations, you need to make up that distance between your expected revenues and where the revenue actually was. And usually you do that by borrowing money and increasing your debt. So that's the point in time at which the debt is getting out of hand. Now, you may be wondering why having a big debt is a bad thing. And you may remember that about a year ago, we were talking about Barcelona having financial problems with their debt. But it's important to remember that the issues then weren't to do with the size of the debt, but the nature of the debt, because Barcelona had a huge chunk of their debt that was a short-term liability, as we call it. That is, debts that are due for repayment within a year or so. And the problem is that if those debts get called in, then you're going to have a cash flow problem and you could even go bankrupt. So the first thing that Joan Laporta did, who was the incoming president at the time, was he restructured those loans. He took out big loans from Goldman Sachs in order to make those short-term liabilities long-term liabilities, and that staved off the problem a year ago. So the problem that Barcelona are facing now is that they're trying to build a team that can recapture some of their former glory, but to rebuild a team, you need to spend money, and there are very specific rules about how you can spend money in La Liga. And that brings us to the squad cost limit. So the squad cost limit is a form of financial fair play that is imposed on all the teams in La Liga by the league itself. Now, most financial fair play systems that you'll see are enforced retrospectively. If you break the rules in your financial planning, then your punishment will be retrospective, usually a fine that's given after the fact. La Liga is slightly different because it's a proactive form of financial fair play, which means you simply cannot break the rules in the first place. To use an analogy, it's like the difference between having a bank account which allows you to go into your overdraft limit but then gives you a fine, versus a bank account that won't even allow you to go into your overdraft limit at all. So La Liga teams can spend as much money as they want during the window, but the problem is that if they don't abide by the rules, they can't register the players that they buy unless they are hitting this squad cost limit. And that's where the problem comes in for Barcelona. So how does a squad cost limit work? Well, La Liga use a more complicated version of this formula here to produce a figure for each club to tell them how much money they can spend on their squad in the course of the window. Now, obviously, each club will have an actual squad cost, which is how much money they've spent on their squad. And that figure will either be under the limit set by the squad cost limit or over the limit. The question is, what impact is that going to have? Well, if you're under the squad cost limit with your actual squad cost, then you can spend all of that money until you hit the limit. If you're actually on the limit, you can then spend as much money as you recoup in sales. So if you sold a player for 100 million, you could then spend that 100 million, reinvest it into your squad. If you're over the limit, then you can actually still spend money on your squad. You can invest in your squad, but only according to these very specific rules. So you're allowed to spend 1 in every 4 euros that you are recouping through sales. So if you sell a player for 100 million, you can then reinvest 25 million of that sale in your squad. But that's obviously a really inefficient way of investing in your squad. So let's take a look at Barcelona's squad cost limit over the last few seasons. And as you can see, it makes for fairly grim reading. You can see here that back in 1920, Barcelona could spend 671 million euros on their squad if they wanted to. And that figure has obviously reduced down until we get to the current window, where Barcelona are in a situation where their squad cost limit is minus 144 million euros. That means they have to recoup 144 million euros just to hit the squad cost limit in the first place. And even when they've hit that limit, they then have to recoup money in order to then be able to reinvest money elsewhere. So at the moment, Barcelona are over here on our squad cost limit diagram, and they need to be over here in order to be able to register the players that they've got. Now, the question is, how do you make that move? And the key to that is going back to our formula here, revenue. If you can increase your revenue by a lot, then you can bring your squad cost from over the limit back down to under the limit, and then you can start reinvesting money, bring those players in that you bought and actually register them so that they can play in the league. The question is, how do you do that? And that is where palancas come in. Now, palancas is a Spanish word which means levers. You may have heard Joan Laporta, the president of Barcelona, talking about these levers that he's going to pull in order to allow Barcelona to get from one side of the squad cost limit to the other. The first one is 10% of the next 25 years of TV revenue, which Barcelona have sold off for a fee of around 207.5 million euros. That's a deal that has already been done, so that brings in a chunk of revenue and already starts moving Barcelona back towards their squad cost limit. And there are in fact two other levers that can be pulled in order to get Barcelona on the right side of that squad cost limit. The first one is this additional 15% of TV revenue over 25 years that is going to be sold off for an estimated fee of around 330 to 400 million euros. And again, that will bring in another chunk of revenue if it is needed. And then there's this final lever that's 49% of a merchandising company that Barcelona own, which they can sell off for a fee of around 200 million euros. And the idea is that these levers will be pulled as and when they are needed in order to get Barcelona on the right side of their squad cost limit. The problem that Barcelona have had this window is not about buying players, but about registering players. And the issue is that they have these four players who, until they are registered by the league, cannot play in the league.
If you like this video, please consider subscribing to the channel. The Athletic brings you the best sports journalism in the world in a personalised experience, connecting you with the stories and teams that you care about the most. There's coverage of 13 sports, plus direct access to world-class journalists through live Q&As, discussions and podcasts. Not to mention, it's all ad-free. And you can try it now for free for 30 days by clicking the link in the description.